Trains are an essential part of life. They help us move from location to location, but sometimes they can be troublesome. Professor of Engineering George Bibel wrote a book about train wrecks. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
And it's not the first time you've been on the show, because you wrote an earlier book on plane crashes.
Yes, I did.
So why the particular interest in the wrecks?
Well, I'm a mechanical engineering professor, and I'll start out to make my lectures more interesting, so I use it a lot in lecture.
Sure.
And it's kind of a science book that tells stories, or storybook that tells science.
Yeah, and that's my next question, leading perfectly into my next question. What can someone expect when they open up this book and start reading it? Is it statistical? Is it stories? Is it both? What kind of a book is it?
Well, it explains how trains crash and what happens when they do, and it tries to use high school level science to explain some of the principles involved. So, for example, surprisingly, they still have the same problems they did 100 years ago, just a lot less often.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how does your engineering background fit in with the writing?
Well, I use a lot of basic science, like Newton's laws and things like that. And I'm very interested in how things break. Okay.
And we have a picture of a train wreck. What are some of the main causes of the train wrecks in your book? And this is the cover of your book here right now. But what kinds of wrecks?
Well, trains derail or fly off the tracks, or they collide, and they derail maybe 100 times more often than they collide. And so typically they derail because of broken equipment. Collisions occur because of human error. A driver does the equivalent of driving through a stoplight.
Sure. And we do have an example of that. There's a wreck in particular in your book, the picture of one where texting was the cause of the accident.
Yeah, this made a lot of national news in 2008 in Los Angeles. The driver drove past 3 warning signs to stop because he was busy texting, and they were going about 43 miles an hour, hit a freight train going about an equal speed, and it shoved the locomotive into the first passenger car and killed 25 people in Los Angeles. Yeah,
and that was in the media for quite a while.
Yes.
The accidents happen. What happens after the accidents? How do they figure out what happened?
Well, the National Transportation Safety Board has a government mandate to investigate all transportation accidents, including plane crashes and train wrecks and even pipeline leaks. So they'll swoop down, especially on all the big headline grabbers, and totally take over the investigation. And they almost always find the problem.
Sure. And once they find out the problem, what kind of things have been taken, safety precautions, I guess, that engineers have, the train engineers, what do they do now compared to when trains first came out? What were some of the bigger safety things that try and prevent wrecks?
Well, they pass laws about not texting while driving a train. That's an easy one.
Sure.
They're in the process of trying to have computers take control and when the driver drives through a stop sign. And in fact, Congress passed a law after that accident, but they're having a hard time doing it. It doesn't look like they're going to meet the deadline. Mm-hmm. It's cell phone technology, and just like we have drop calls, they have reliability issues, and then there's bandwidth problems. They can't get enough radio frequency in large cities. Used to give it away, now it's all gobbled up because everyone's using a cell phone.
Sure, and we're talking about technology, but the basic technology of trains are the same, right? And we have a picture of an older picture of trains. What are we looking at? This is in your book as well.
Well, this is a control tower. There used to be hundreds of them out and about the countryside, and those levers would activate pipes. They might be hundreds of feet long to change a switch or a signal, and they'd be interlocked, so they could only do it in a certain sequence to prevent collisions, and it's all
today,
been automated.
It's all automated now today. Okay.
Well, they'll have the same thing controlled remotely by a dispatcher.
Sure. I have to ask one last question. What gets you excited about these kinds of topics?
Well, I think they're interesting. They're attention grabbers. They're headline grabbers, and I think the students get more interesting. I think when you can relate to real life interesting stories and disasters, it makes it more interesting for the students, and it's more interesting for me too.
Sure. All right. Well, it is interesting. Thank you for coming on the show today and talking to us about your book.
Thank you for inviting me.